Hello class, now we're going to do an example on simplifying rational expressions, multiplying and dividing. For those of you who are curious, this is from homework 53, problem 1. Right, so the first thing we always want to do, as always, when we look at a problem, is we want to ask ourselves, what is this problem asking? So I look at this, I notice I see some polynomials, see fractions with some variables, and more polynomials. And I also see a division sign. So I am thinking that I want to make ones and simplify as much as possible since we have this fraction. Alright, so the first thing we need to do, well, we need to get rid of this division sign, so we need to flip it and reciprocate it, right? Turn division into multiplication so that it can be one entire fraction. So let's go ahead and rewrite. Negative 3 times x squared minus 8x minus 9 all over x to the negative 8th y to the 2nd. Again, we flipped it and we're going to reciprocate it to turn into multiplication. X to the 7th times y to the 4th times negative 10x plus 40. It's 9x plus 81. You can notice it's the second fraction because we are taking the reciprocal, and so I take the bottom and I put it on top. Take the top and I'm going to put it on the bottom. X squared minus 3x minus 4. X squared minus 81. Okay. So again, we did all of that because now we can make it into one fraction so that we can make ones and cancel out as much as possible. So what I like to do next here, and you don't have to, but this is what I like to do, is I like to organize my work so that my brain is not confused with all these different variables running around. So I'm going to go ahead and in different colors, I'm going to go ahead and write my numbers first. So negative 3, and then write my variables in blue. So the 7th, y to the 4th, and then, I don't know if you can tell, then in green I'm going to go ahead and write my polynomials so I know which ones I need to factor. Okay, so now at least I can tell what part is going to go with what when we make ones. Again, I made it all into one big fraction because it's multiplication. Any numbers on the bottom? Well, I see a 5, so I'm going to go ahead and move it to the front so I don't lose it. And a lot of people have asked, what, the 5 isn't married to the x squared? Well, when you have multiplication in this way, it doesn't matter what order you write it. 2 times 5 is the same as 5 times 2, so I can go ahead and move it. Make sure if you do this though, oh, look what I just did. I almost forgot and I almost lost those variables. Make sure you don't do that. Let's go ahead and cross that out. So make sure to always double check your work. It's minus 4 times x squared minus 81. Okay, now we can see. Eventually we're going to try to make ones with the numbers, make ones with the x's and with the y's. But before we can do that, we need to be able to factor as much as possible so we can simplify. So you guys can use the box to factor. Let's go ahead and factor x squared minus 8x minus 1. For here, we're going to do some work. Well, it multiplies to negative 9 and adds up to negative 8. Well, negative 9x and x. So we have our two factors. So then when I rewrite this, instead of x squared minus 8x minus 9, I'm going to go ahead and write x plus 1 times x minus 9, because they are the same thing, and now I can see if there are anything that I can make ones with. So remember, even though this is not x squared, and you guys are super good at doing quadratic factoring, that doesn't mean that you necessarily can't factor. And go ahead and make a simpler box over here. There's negative 10x plus 40. I'm going to ask myself, is there anything that I can divide out that they have in common? I notice they both have zeros, which means I can divide out a 10. Because I just personally prefer to not have negative x in the beginning, I'm going to divide out negative 10. All right, what times negative 10 gives us negative 10x? X, 1x. And then what times negative 10 gives us 40? Negative 4. So here are our two factors. Again, the outside of the box always are the factors for the sum of the inside of the box. So instead of writing negative 10x plus 40, I take the 2 on the outside, bring it over here, and I'm going to put x minus 4. But here's the thing, there was a negative 10, so I'm going to go ahead and write that as well, but I'm going to write that in the front with the rest of the numbers so that it's nice and organized. And finally, if I were to apply that same technique to this last polynomial, I would get 9 times x plus 9. Go back over here and write x plus 9. And like I said before, I don't want to lose the number, so I'm going to go ahead and write that in purple with my numbers. So again, we are organized by numbers, variables, and polynomials. And that is a standard way in academic math. But if that doesn't make sense to you, that is okay. You can organize it in a way that makes sense to you. But this is something you should be able to recognize. All right. So now let's look at the bottom of the fraction. Sorry about my crooked lines. Okay. So now we don't need to simplify any of these. Actually, we can simplify these two x's on the bottom. Remember that when the bases are the same, we can go ahead and add the exponents, because it's like if I drew out 12 x's, then I took 8 away. How many x's would I have total? I would have 4 x's. Now I have 2 y's, and I took 5 away. I will have negative 3 y's. We cannot forget about our number up here, so I'm going to go ahead and put the 5 on the bottom. Now let's go ahead and factor out these two. Go ahead and use the box. Same technique as what we did up here. And the factors would be x minus 4 times x plus 1. Here's the other thing. So remember, when you have another factor and you have a perfect square, a subtraction sign, and then a perfect square, remember we have a shortcut for that. But I can go ahead and also use the box if that doesn't make sense. Squared minus 81. So we ask ourselves, remember, this times this has to equal this box times this box. So what two numbers multiply to negative 81x squared, but they add up to, oh look, there is no x in this factor, so they have to add up to 0. What multiplies to negative 81 but adds up to 0x? Well, negative 9x and 9x. So remember, the shortcut is that you take the square root of the first one and the square root of the second one, and you have one that's minus, one that's plus, because then when you multiply them, it gives you negative 81, but when you add them, it gives you 0. All right, look over here, x minus 9 times x plus 9. Okay, so now we just did all this factoring, and why is that helpful? Well, it's helpful because whenever you divide a number by itself, it's like dividing by 1. So you can make a 1 and get rid of it. Let's see, which ones are the same? X plus 1 here, x minus 9, x minus 9. Oh, we have an x minus 4, and we have an x minus 4, and we have an x plus 9 and x plus 9. Look at that. So look, let's just take a step back. We went from having 5 different polynomials, we factored it, and they all canceled out, and now we don't even have to worry about those anymore. This way is so helpful for us to take some time to think about what factors out. Okay, so we've crossed all those out. Now let's go ahead and first look at the purple numbers. See if there's anything there that we can make a 1 out of. So I noticed that 10 and 5, you can both divide by 5. So I'm going to go ahead and divide the 10 by 5, which is 2. Divide the 5 by 5, which is 1. So we made a 1 there. So we have 9 times negative 2 times negative 3. Okay? So then we have 18 times 3, which is 54. All right, now we have 7 x's on top and 4 on bottom. If we have 7 x's on top and 4 on bottom, how many can we cross out? We can cross out 4. So we will have 3 on top. Remember, the shortcut there is you take, when the bases are the same and you're dividing, you subtract the exponents because they cross out and make a 1. Now we have y equals negative 3 on the bottom, which we can rewrite as y equals 3 on the top. Because remember, when we have a negative exponent, we could move it to the top of the fraction, because negative exponents are reciprocals of positive ones. So we have, or you can say 4 minus minus 3, which is 7. So we have y to the 7th. Now, is there anything else we need to simplify here? Nope. Then we go ahead and then we look at our answer, and we notice that we have it written number, then x and y, because x comes before y. And there's nothing else that we need to do to simplify. So that is our answer. So when you look up here, negative 3 times x squared minus 8x minus 9 all over x to the negative 8th, y to the 2nd, divided by 5x to the 12th, y to the negative 5th, times x squared minus 3x minus 4 times x squared minus 81 all over x to the 7th, y to the 4th, times negative 10x plus 40 times 9x plus 81. If you factor all of that, make it ones, your final answer becomes 54x cubed y to the 7th. Right? And that is how you go ahead and you simplify rational expressions using multiplying or dividing. Now, my question for you guys is, if this were not dividing, what would our first step be? Would we flip it and reciprocate it? No, we would not do that, because the only reason we do that is because we are turning division into multiplication. If it were multiplication already, we could just go ahead and start organizing and factoring things out and looking for ones. Good luck.